They laughed when she walked into the room. A simple woman with no military background, no connections, and definitely no fancy flight school behind her. Just a dream, a quiet determination, and the kind of focus most people never even recognize. At the elite pilot training camp, she was told she didn't belong. She didn't have the right look, the right voice, or the right past. And so they kicked her out. No explanation, no second chances. But what they didn't know was she had a plan. This is not just another story about proving people wrong. This is about grit, heart, and what happens when someone takes every no and turns it into rocket fuel. As the other trainees moved on with their polished paths and perfect records, she disappeared. For months, no one heard from her, until the day something unbelievable happened. It was supposed to be a normal training exercise. The sky was clear. The airbase was calm. But then, from out of nowhere, a jet approached. Not just any jet, an F-22 Raptor. And sitting in the cockpit, someone no one expected to ever see again. She didn't just come back. She landed right on the runway of the very camp that turned its back on her. So, how did she do it? And why now? You'll want to hear the rest. Her name was Mia Torres, small-town mechanic, daughter of a crop duster pilot, and someone who'd spent more time in hangars than in classrooms. Flying wasn't just a dream, it was the only thing that ever made sense to her. But when she showed up at the military pilot camp with a recommendation letter and raw talent, they didn't even give her a fair shot. The instructors said she lacked discipline. The other trainees mocked her for not fitting the fighter pilot mold. She didn't argue. She just quietly packed up and left, while everyone assumed they'd never see her again. But what no one realized was Mia wasn't done learning. Far from it. She disappeared into the background, picking up side jobs at small airports, volunteering at private airfields, and trading work for time in simulators. Word spread in tight circles about a woman who flew like she'd been born in the sky. Still, she stayed off the radar. No uniform, no rank, just raw, obsessive training and focus. So when that F-22 descended on the base, no one could explain how Mia got her hands on it, let alone how she managed to fly it with such precision. The base scrambled. Officers rushed the runway, and all anyone could ask was, where had she been, and what was she about to do next? Mia didn't step out of the F-22 right away. She just sat there, helmet on, engine cooling down, as the crew surrounded her with weapons drawn. No one recognized the flight number. No clearance codes had been logged. It was as if the jet and the pilot appeared out of thin air. Some thought it was a stunt. Others thought it was a breach. But deep down, the old instructors knew exactly who was in that cockpit, and that scared them more than anything. Colonel Reed, the man who once dismissed Mia with a single glance, was now at the front of the crowd. His face was pale. He'd built his reputation on pushing out unfit recruits, and Mia was supposed to be one of his easiest decisions. But here she was, breaking every rule, rewriting the story on her own terms. What they didn't know was that Mia had been following a trail of discarded talent, others like her who'd been turned away, not for lack of skill, but for not fitting into a narrow idea of what a pilot should look like. Meanwhile, deep in the shadows of the aviation world, rumors started to spread. About a rogue pilot flying classified aircraft, about stolen simulator data, about secret training facilities not even the government fully tracked, and at the center of it all, Mia Torres. The base was on lockdown, no one in or out. The F-22 sat motionless on the runway, but the air around it buzzed with tension. News hadn't hit the media yet, but inside the chain of command, alarms were ringing. A civilian had flown one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, undetected. That alone was enough to spark investigations, security sweeps, and classified briefings. But for Mia, this wasn't about breaking rules. It was about breaking silence. Inside the control tower, Colonel Reed was torn. His orders were to contain the situation, but this wasn't just a threat, it was personal. He remembered the look in Mia's eyes when she left, how quietly she accepted rejection, like it wasn't the first time someone underestimated her. Now she was back, and she hadn't come alone. Somewhere out there were others. Pilots no one had heard of, trained in silence, flying under the radar. And if Mia had found a way to access a jet like the F-22, what else was she capable of? Inside the control tower, Colonel Reed was torn. His orders were to contain the situation, but this wasn't just a threat, it was personal. He remembered the look in Mia's eyes when she left, how quietly she accepted rejection, like it wasn't the first time someone underestimated her. Now she was back, and she hadn't come alone. Somewhere out there were others, pilots no one had heard of, trained in silence, flying under the radar. And if Mia had found a way to access a jet like the F-22, what else was she capable of? Meanwhile, high above the base, a second aircraft appeared on radar. Unidentified, no call sign, headed straight for them. The control room erupted. Were more rogue pilots inbound? Was this an attack or a message? And still, Mia didn't speak. She just waited. The world was watching, but only she knew what was coming next. The radar tech's voice cracked as he confirmed it. Another aircraft, this time even faster than the first, breaking into restricted airspace without any identification. The control tower scrambled for options, but there was no time for protocol. The jet was already visible in the sky, descending with impossible precision. As the second fighter lined up for landing, panic spread across the base. 2 unauthorized jets, 1 base, no answers. Mia finally moved. Slowly, she stepped out of the F-22, helmet tucked under one arm, calm in the chaos. All eyes locked on her, but she didn't flinch. The second jet touched down behind her, kicking up dust as its wheels screeched against the runway. Then came the twist no one was ready for. A familiar face climbed down from the cockpit. It was Captain Elijah Banks, a highly decorated pilot who had vanished months earlier during a classified mission. Officially, he'd been declared missing. Unofficially, some whispered he'd gone rogue. Now he stood beside Mia without saying a word. Colonel Reed's voice cracked through the radio, demanding answers. But none came, not yet. What was this? A rebellion? A warning? Or something bigger? The base was no longer just a training ground. It had become a stage. And the world's most advanced pilots, the ones written off and erased, had just returned. Not for revenge, for something far more dangerous. The base was frozen in silence. 2 fighter jets, 2 pilots who weren't supposed to be there, one officially dismissed, the other declared missing. Mia and Captain Banks stood shoulder to shoulder, not speaking, not moving. Then finally, Mia stepped forward. With eyes locked on Colonel Reed, she spoke just one sentence. Asterisk, we've come to show you what you missed. Asterisk. She didn't yell. She didn't demand anything. But the power in her voice shook the room more than any weapon ever could. A group of people stepped onto the runway behind her, faces no one recognized, yet all of them carried the look of someone who had once been told they weren't good enough. Some had been rejected from training camps. Others had disappeared from the radar after top-tier test scores mysteriously didn't qualify. They weren't rebels, they were pilots. Skilled, brilliant, forgotten. Mia reached into her flight suit and handed over a drive to the base commander. On it, flight data, simulator logs, footage of underground training flights, everything proving how these pilots had been secretly perfecting their craft using decommissioned airfields and salvaged equipment. But the real twist: the F-22 and the second jet weren't stolen. They were returned, loaned quietly by someone high up in the chain of command, someone who believed in them and wanted to expose the system from within. And just like that, Mia didn't ask for a second chance. She gave them *1. The days that followed were unlike anything the base had ever seen. Instead of being arrested or silenced, Mia and her team were brought into closed-door meetings. The data she turned over revealed a hard truth. Year after year, highly capable pilots had been turned away, Not because they lacked skill, but because they didn't match a narrow standard. Mia's story had opened a door that couldn't be shut again. Captain Elijah Banks, once listed as missing in action, was cleared and reinstated. It turned out he hadn't gone rogue, had gone searching. After seeing pilots like Mia pushed aside, he quietly stepped away to help train the ones no one else would. With private airfields, retired jets, and a small circle of insiders, they built something no one thought possible, an off-grid flight program run on grit and passion. The military had no choice but to respond. Internal reviews were launched, outdated recruitment policies were re-examined, and new eyes were brought into leadership. Mia was offered a position not as a student, but as an instructor. At first, she turned it down. She wasn't in it for titles. But when they agreed to fund a new advanced training unit built on fairness and skill, not background or connections, she said yes. For the others who had stood on that runway with her, their paths changed too. Some rejoined official training programs. Others became part of Mia's new unit. One even went on to design simulator software now used in elite programs. These weren't just comeback stories. They were proof that talent doesn't always come wrapped the way people expect. And that F-22. It was returned without a scratch, but its landing left a mark that would never be forgotten. Mia Torres didn't just fly it, she flew straight through the barriers that tried to hold her back. Her story became a symbol in the aviation world, shared in training rooms, online forums, and classrooms. A reminder that sometimes the system doesn't need to be fought, it needs to be shown what it's missing. Because when the sky is open and the runway is clear, the people most worth watching aren't the ones you expect. They're the ones who never stopped flying, even when no one was watching.